Ever seen someone win big and something feels off? This story starts with a simple post that doesn't add up. Stick with me to the end. And if you like sharp stories like this, hit subscribe. I was in a Home Depot outside Richmond, holding a pack of light bulbs and scrolling my phone, half watching the guy ahead of me argue about lumber cuts. That's when Nyla Hale's post popped up. Big grin, big banner. Grand opening, 4th location, across the back wall, like she personally laid the bricks herself. Her new husband, Cash Rourke, had his arm around her, gym shirt tight, teeth like he'd had them bleached that morning. The two of them had that look, glossy, smug, like they were auditioning for a local business commercial. Her caption hit worse than the photo. Something about finally having a real husband who takes care of himself, unlike some people. Then she tagged it with the brag, 4th location open, claiming over 40% growth within 30 months. Real slick. Clean wording. Dirty intent, like I hadn't spent nearly a decade keeping their family bakery chain from burning to the ground while she was already warming up the next guy. I tapped the likes. That made it worse. Her dad Gordon, her uncle Lester, a couple managers who used to blow up my phone when the ovens broke or the payroll system glitched. All of them clapping like seals. Before we go on, share in the comments which country you're watching from, and let's continue. I felt that old heat climb up the side of my neck, the kind that used to hit me whenever Nyla found the tender spot and pressed, then called it tough love. Same heat I got the day she looked me dead in the face and said I was just jealous, while she was already lining up cash behind me. I could have unloaded right there. I had proof. DMs, budget breakdowns, emails where she begged me to fix another one of Gordon's screw-ups. I could have written a full expose in that comment box. Instead, I hit like. Then I typed 3 words. Check the books. It looked harmless, just another passive-aggressive ex. But that comment, that was a trigger, because buried in the divorce settlement Nyla thought I'd never use, there was a clause, and that clause made her little grand opening stunt count as a violation. I took a screenshot, then another one with the timestamp showing, sent both to myself, and forwarded them straight to my lawyer before I even made it back to my truck. I sat there, engine off, receipt on the seat next to me. That dumb bag of light bulbs was still in my hand, and all I could think was, Nyla just announced the one thing she wasn't allowed to announce. Not yet, not without making it cost her. I set the light bulbs on my kitchen counter, didn't even bother putting them away, and went straight for my laptop. I opened the divorce folder I kept backed up in 3 different places because I don't trust people to play fair when money's involved, and I learned that the hard way. The file loaded slow, like it was making me wait on purpose. When it finally opened, I scrolled straight to the clause Mallory had walked me through, line by line. She called it a tripwire back then, said it like she was pointing out something small that could still snap your fingers if you touched it wrong. I remembered asking her, "You really think they'll mess up this bad?" Mallory didn't even smile. She just said, "People who think they're winning usually get loud before they get careful." She was right. The wording sat there clean and tight. If Hale Hearth Group publicly announced expansion that pushed growth past a specific threshold within a fixed window, I had the right to demand an independent forensic audit. No arguing, no delays, just paperwork and consequences. The number mattered. It wasn't 30% like most people would assume. It was 28% growth within 30 months. That number didn't happen by accident, and Mallory made sure of it. The second they bragged about it in public, the window opened whether they liked it or not. And if the audit confirmed it, I got paid. Not some vague settlement, not a handshake. 13% of the growth value past that line. Real money, tied to real numbers. For 9 years of work they pretended was me helping out. I leaned back in my chair for a second, staring at the screen. 9 years of fixing their messes after my day job, late nights, weekends, constant calls. They treated it like a hobby I chose, like I enjoyed cleaning up after them. I didn't call Nyla. There was nothing left to say to her that mattered. I didn't call Gordon either. He would have turned it into a lecture before I even finished my first sentence. And I sure wasn't going to argue in her comment section like some guy trying to win points online. I pulled up my contacts and hit Arden Hale. He picked up on the second ring. No hesitation, no small talk. "I saw the post," he said. "I saw your comment." I walked over to the sink, staring out the window at nothing in particular. "Then you know what that means." There was a short pause, not confused, just measured. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask me to explain. That told me everything. He'd already done the math in his head, already connected the same dots I had. "Numbers have been off," Arden said. "Too smooth, too clean. Ingredient costs are up everywhere, but somehow we're posting perfect margins. That doesn't happen." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Especially not with 3 locations already stretched thin." "Exactly," he said. Either someone's lying or someone's hiding something. That tracked. In that family, it was usually both. Before we hung up, his voice dropped just a little, like he was locking in. If Cash is as involved as he acts online, Arden said, then he's either stupid or dirty. Either way, we're going to find out. I ended the call and immediately opened a new email to Mallory, attaching the screenshots and typing one line, "Trigger confirmed, proceed." Then I hit send. The morning after I hit send, I opened my inbox, and there it was, an email from Mallory with the subject line, "Draft filed, enforcement action, hail." I clicked it, and the attachment opened clean. 4 pages, tight language, no fluff. It read like a checklist, sharp and final. No drama, no emotion, just facts, clause citations, triggers, deadlines, and case numbers. Mallory didn't believe in threats. She believed in enforcement. I didn't have time to sit with it. I had work. Mondays at the dental clinic start before the doors even unlocked. Cleanings, reschedules, insurance claims, and a waiting room full of people flipping through magazines like they weren't silently panicking about drills. Between a root canal that ran over and the copier jamming so hard it sounded like it was dying, I printed the authorization form, signed it in blue ink, and scanned it back to Mallory from the front desk like I was approving a supply order. She didn't call to ask if I was sure. Instead, I got a reply with the header, confirmed filing, and a list of motion components. Full forensic audit request, expedited calendar push, demand for transaction-level review going back 36 months. No summary format, no executive digest. Every line item, every invoice, every vendor tracked and verified. Mallory ended the email with one sentence. "You won't like the noise. Stick to facts." She wasn't wrong. By the time I got off my shift and sat in my car, my phone wouldn't stop lighting up. 9 missed calls in just over an hour. Half the numbers weren't saved. I didn't pick up a single one. The first voicemail came from Nyla. Her voice had that syrupy calm she used when she wanted you to think you were the problem. She said she just wanted to understand what I was doing and hoped I'd be reasonable. The second voicemail was Gordon. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He sounded disappointed, like I'd vandalized the side of his house, instead of activating a clause he personally signed in mediation. Then came Cash. I had to laugh halfway through his message. This guy, who'd been in the family photo for maybe 2 years, was already acting like the moral compass of the company. He called me bitter and obsessed and said I was ruining people's livelihoods. "People are going to lose jobs over your little tantrum," he said, like he was the champion of hourly workers now. "You need to get over it." I forwarded every voicemail to Mallory without a word. I didn't respond to a single one. Silence wasn't just peace. It was me refusing to hand them anything to twist. You can spin a reply, but you can't spin a blank line. Later that night, I got the notification that Nyla had deleted the original grand opening post and blocked me. No warning, no explanation, just gone. But that didn't matter. I already had the screenshots, the metadata, the timestamp, and now I had a court motion that made those screenshots worth real money. I didn't come into that family looking for a job. I came in as Nyla's husband, and somehow, without ever signing a payroll form, I ended up running the back end of their entire operation, like it was my second full-time career. When I say I worked for free, I don't mean I helped on a few busy weekends. I mean I rebuilt their scheduling system from scratch, standardized their supply chain, taught managers how to close out correctly, and cleaned up payroll so their employees didn't quit over bounced checks. And I did all of it after hours, late nights, holidays, and more quick favors than I could count, because it was always a crisis, and it was always family. Hale Hearth started as a single bakery cafe that Gordon ran like it was still 1992. No digital anything, no structure. Vendor invoices were paper-stuffed in folders labeled by season, spring stuff, fall flower, like the IRS cared about cute names. I walked into that mess thinking I'd just help them catch up on a few things. I walked out 9 years later with nothing but a settlement and a spreadsheet full of labor hours they refused to acknowledge. Nyla smiled through every ribbon-cutting and charity event. She was the public face. Gordon was the throne, the visionary. And I was the engine they never talked about. When ingredients got short, when locations opened on skeleton crews, when payroll landed 30 minutes before someone threatened to quit, I was the reason. But they never called it work. They called it being supportive. Arden had the degree, MBA, sharp mind, detail-oriented, but he asked questions, which meant Gordon shut him out. I kept my mouth shut, so they treated me like a team player. That's how it worked in their house. Loyalty meant obedience, and pushback meant you were just trying to start something. Then came Cash. At first, he was just around. Some branding help, Nyla said, was part of a new marketing plan. He showed up for photo shoots, charity events, tastings, always dressed like a trainer between clients. I figured he was harmless, just another influencer type with no real responsibilities. but he stuck around. While my divorce was still being processed, Nyla brought him to a family holiday dinner like it was nothing. No warning, no shame. Gordon poured him bourbon and called him son before the turkey even hit the table. I was the one making it awkward, apparently. And anytime I raised my voice or even looked like I was going to say something, Nyla would hit me with that line, "You're just threatened." Slick way to dodge a truth she didn't want to answer. The week after our settlement was finalized, her social media kicked into overdrive. She was posting like she won a prize. More smiling, more humble brags, more subtle digs about how support is action, not excuses. Everything carefully worded to sound inspiring but still aimed straight at my throat. I wasn't out for blood. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted out of the game where I did the work, took the hits, and got told to smile because it was all for the family. Then she posted that grand opening. And the second I saw that banner, I knew she'd stepped on the tripwire herself. Mallory built that clause for this exact reason, because Nyla couldn't help showing off. The conference room in Mallory's office was glass-walled and quiet, the kind of space where you could hear someone flip a page from 20 feet away. Gwen Larkins walked in carrying a hard-sided case and a laptop that looked like it had seen combat. She was late 50s, gray at the roots, no-nonsense posture, no jewelry. She didn't smile like she meant it, and I respected that right away. She slid a printed request packet across the table, didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm not here to interpret intent. I'm here to verify numbers." Her voice was calm, not cold, like she'd had this exact conversation 1,000 times and already knew how it ended. She flipped open her file like it was routine, like we were talking about inventory, not consequences. First line she read out loud, confirmed growth over threshold, preliminary estimate, just over 40% within the 30-month window. Mallory nodded but didn't say anything. I let that number hit for a second. That was it. That was the mark. No more hypotheticals. My clause was officially alive. It wasn't just something buried in a document anymore. It was money they owed me, real and enforceable. Gwen moved to the second page, and that's when the air in the room changed. She used the phrase, reconciliation issues, and Mallory's posture shifted just enough for me to notice. "There are inconsistencies," Gwen said, tapping a chart. "Marketing and launch consulting fees have spiked across all locations. The expenses don't track with observable outcomes." I leaned forward. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the books show high-cost services that don't reflect in physical upgrades, customer engagement, or direct revenue lift. There are also repeat vendor names with inconsistent spelling and invoice sequencing that doesn't follow internal standards." Mallory looked up from the page. "You think it's fraud?" Gwen didn't blink. "I'm not calling it anything yet, but the volume of anomalies is enough to require deeper tracing, approval trails, payment routing, and related party disclosures." She paused. "Not for drama, just to make sure we understood." "If this turns out to be deliberate," she said, "I'm legally obligated to report it to the appropriate agencies. This isn't optional. I'm not asking permission." That shut the room down for a few beats. No questions, just a slow burn of silence while we let that word hang. "Fraud." Mallory said, "Understood," and passed her a thumb drive with the initial set of financials we'd obtained during discovery. Gwen packed up without small talk. "You'll hear from me within 3 weeks. I don't delay." And she didn't. 19 days later, I got an encrypted email from her office with a short note attached. It read, "Preliminary finding. Multiple payments routed through shell vendors to accounts linked to Cash Rourke. Pattern suggests intent, not error." I read it twice. My stomach clenched, but not from nerves, from clarity. Cash had been so smug in those voicemails, like he thought he was bulletproof. Turns out he wasn't even subtle. I forwarded the note to Arden and waited. He replied 5 minutes later. "One line. That matches what I've been hearing from managers. Keep going." I didn't have to ask Arden what he planned to do next. I knew him well enough to trust he wouldn't wait around for Gwen to finish her report before taking the temperature on the ground. He started visiting locations like a ghost, quiet, unannounced, casual check-ins that didn't raise alarms. He wasn't swinging a clipboard around or grilling people. He sat down across from assistant managers during slow hours and asked questions like, "How have things felt lately?" and, "You guys seeing your bonuses come through on time?" One of those conversations led him to Reese Dalton. Reese was an assistant manager at the Glen Allen location. Newer spot, decent traffic, still short-staffed most weeks. I didn't know him personally, but Arden said he was sharp, detail-driven, and not easily intimidated. The kind of guy who noticed when his numbers stopped adding up. Reese told Arden the bonus pool had been shrinking for months, not just a little. He said back in the spring, full-time staff were still hitting targets but getting payouts that were suddenly 20 to 30% lighter. The company line? "Expansion is expensive. That was the phrase Nyla and Gordon both liked to use when people asked where the numbers went. If anyone pushed harder, they got pulled into the office and told they weren't being team players. Reese said he'd seen good employees quit quietly after being called disloyal just for asking what they'd earned. Arden asked for specifics, names, dates, how the shift leads explained it, who signed off on the cutbacks. Reese had all of it, emails, Slack messages. He'd kept track, not because he planned to whistleblow, but because the missing money wasn't theoretical to him. It was the second half of rent. It was daycare. It was the overtime he'd covered for someone who needed a day off and was promised a bigger check that never came. That's when Arden did something smart and risky. He started recording his conversations. Virginia's a one-party consent state, which means if you're part of the discussion, you don't need anyone's permission to hit record. Arden wasn't trying to play gotcha. He did it because he knew Gordon's favorite move was denial. Say nothing, deny everything, then act wounded that someone questioned his character. Arden wasn't going to let him get away with it this time. The recordings weren't dramatic. No screaming, no confessions, just regular people explaining how they'd been talked out of what they were owed. Managers repeating phrases that didn't come from nowhere. Tight budget, trust the process. We'll make it up next quarter. It was all code for, you're not getting it, and we're hoping you won't push back. A few days later, I got an email from Arden with a folder titled Employee Notes. I didn't open it at work. I waited until I was home, sat at my kitchen table, poured a drink, and hit play on the first recording. What I heard made my jaw lock. Reese talking about missing his son's birthday shift because the bakery couldn't spare him. Another manager explaining how they had to lie to a line cook about a promised raise because the bonus pool had been reallocated. Not one of them sounded angry. That's what got me. They all sounded resigned. Like this was just what happened when you trusted people too much. I called Arden. Told him I'd listened. Told him I needed a minute. He said, that's why I didn't loop you in earlier. I didn't want anyone saying you coached these people or stirred up trouble. This needs to stay clean. I sat there in silence, trying to hold back the heat in my chest. Then Arden said one more thing. I'm not just helping you get paid. I'm making sure they can't bury this when it spreads. And I knew he meant every word. The moment Gwen started asking follow-up questions in writing, Cash went loud. Not directly. He wasn't built for direct. He posted little quotes online about jealous energy and how success exposes people who secretly wanted you small. No names, of course. Just vague enough to sound deep and just obvious enough to know exactly who it was aimed at. A mutual contact sent me a screenshot from his story. Some people can't handle when you upgrade, so they weaponize old ties. It was the kind of thing a teenager would post after getting dumped, not a grown man at the center of a corporate audit, but that was Cash. He thought image could win any war. Smile wide enough, post often enough, and people stop asking what's real. I didn't comment. I didn't repost. I just sent the screenshots to Mallory with a subject line that said, FYI, PR game starting. She replied with one sentence. Documented. Move on. Then Cash tried something dirty. A vendor email showed up in the latest discovery batch, some third-party marketing consultant with a familiar name and a vague invoice trail. At first glance, it looked like I'd authorized them years ago using my old personal email address. My heart actually dropped when I saw it. I knew exactly how it would sound in court if someone didn't look twice. But Gwen did look twice. She pulled the metadata before I even brought it up. The file was created recently, weeks ago, not years. The routing was artificial. The IP pointed to a third-party masking service, and the email header didn't match any sent item on record from my end. When I asked Gwen if she was sure, she looked over her glasses and said, people who fake records always underestimate the timestamps. Meanwhile, Arden texted me a new update. Reese had overheard something in the break room. Cash asking 2 shift managers where I was living now, if I still use the same bank, if I ever stop by the old locations. He made it sound like small talk, Arden said. But it wasn't. Nyla called again. This time, there was no sugarcoat, no friendly edge. Her voice was clipped and cold. You're destroying my family, she said. You don't need to do this. You could still tell Mallory to back off. I know you can. I kept my voice calm. This isn't about feelings, Nyla. It's about paper. You signed the clause. You broke the terms. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she hung up. Just dead air, like she couldn't stand hearing the truth in her own voice. Mallory didn't wait. She drafted and sent a formal notice to Gordon that same afternoon. The wording was surgical. Any attempt to falsify records, intimidate witnesses, or obstruct audit proceedings would be documented and submitted directly to the court under penalty of fraud. The next day, Cash's posts vanished. His feed went dark. No more quotes, no more victory laps. Just silence. Like someone finally reminded him that screenshots don't disappear when you delete the caption. They held the meeting at the original Hale Hearth location, the one with the cracked tile near the counter and the outdated mural Gordon still called charming. After hours, no press, no public, just board members, outside counsel, and one ghost they didn't think would show up. Me. Mallory filed notice ahead of time. Because the motion triggered a formal valuation under the compensation clause, I was listed as an interested party. That meant I had every right to attend. Gordon didn't like it. He tried to push back through his lawyer, but legally, he couldn't keep me out. I showed up in the same plain charcoal suit I wear to funerals and court, because I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just remind them I knew how to sit still and outlast a storm. Nyla was already seated next to Gordon, back straight, face polished like she'd practiced the entire drive there. Not a hair out of place, not a single blink too fast. Her whole body said, "I'm the real victim here," and she hadn't even opened her mouth yet. Cash stood near the window, arms folded like he was posing for a campaign ad. When he saw me walk in, he smirked. That surprised me. Not that he was there. I expected that. What got me was the look, like he still believed charm could beat documents, like this was a PR issue, not a legal one. Arden sat at the far end with his laptop open, posture tight, sleeves rolled up like he was ready to fix something broken. He didn't greet anyone, just nodded once and kept quiet, watching. Lester Hale was in the corner. That told me more than any document ever could. Lester only came out when legal exposure got real. He wasn't a baker, he was insurance, the "don't drag the whole family into this, uncle." You only heard from him when someone said the word felony out loud. Mallory took the seat beside me. Gwen Larkins was across from us, calm as ever, folders stacked by topic and timestamp. She opened with numbers. Growth over the threshold? Confirmed. 41.2% in the 30-month window. That meant compensation to me was triggered, non-negotiable. Then she turned the page and the air in the room changed. Gwen spoke clearly. No flair. We have confirmed instances of payments routed through shell vendors, fake marketing firms, and consulting services that show no actual deliverables. Many of those accounts are tied to Mr. Rourke. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The documents did the talking. Invoice patterns indicate duplication, same line items, slightly altered spelling, rapid approval timelines. Authorization signatures trace back to both Cash Rourke and Nyla Hale on more than one occasion. I watched Nyla's jaw tighten. She didn't speak. Not yet. Gwen closed the summary calmly. This isn't a case of sloppy records. This is a coordinated diversion of funds, and the growth, while real, was propped up by pulling from internal reserves, including employee bonus pools, to cover liquidity gaps. That's when Arden stood up. He connected his laptop to the TV screen and played a few short clips, just voices, no video. Managers explaining how their location hit bonuses but were told they'd been redirected to stabilize expansion. Then Arden said, "This wasn't about bad math. This was about hiding the cracks. The people in these recordings, they kept this company running while being lied to." Cash broke first. He stepped forward, trying to spin. "This is a setup. He's bitter because Nyla moved on, and he couldn't handle it." I didn't even look at him. Mallory spoke instead. "This isn't about a breakup, Mr. Rourke. This is about fraudulent transactions, breached clauses, and damages." Nyla finally joined in, eyes on me like she was rehearsing it all over again. "You always wanted control. You couldn't handle it when someone else led." I held her stare for a moment and said, "I didn't want control. I wanted credit. You're the one who turned that into a war." Then Lester spoke, first time all night. "If we don't handle this the right way," he said, low and clear, "the state will handle it for us." That shut the room down. Gordon tried to float a quiet settlement. Pay me, fire someone, and walk away clean. But Gwen leaned forward. "You don't get to bury evidence just because you're ready to move on. That's not how this works." She slid a copy of her preliminary report across the table. And that's when it broke for real, because everyone in that room knew what came next. The day after that meeting, everything started cracking. Once jail enters the conversation, people get honest real fast. Nobody wanted to go down for someone else's scheme, especially not over bakery profits and inflated invoices. Gwen locked in the numbers first. She sent Mallory and the board a final report with itemized damage totals. About $192,600 had been funneled through fake vendors and marketing shells. Another $74,800 was siphoned directly from the employee bonus pool to keep the books looking clean and expansion rolling. My payout under the growth clause landed at just over $318,000. No fluff, no rounding. It was clean, enforceable, and backed by every line item Gwen had pulled. Gordon tried to stall, claiming valuation discrepancies and unclear labor contributions. But Mallory buried that fast. She pointed to the clause wording in the settlement and walked the judge through it in plain English. The court issued an expedited order to release the funds. After that, Gordon stopped talking so loud. Nyla didn't get charged, at least not right away, but that turned out to be worse for her. The second Gwen's report hit the board, Nyla's name showed up on half a dozen approvals tied to the fake charges. She didn't author the scam, but she rubber-stamped it. And in a family like theirs, silence looks a lot like consent. She couldn't claim innocence anymore. Not in front of the board, not in front of Lester, and definitely not in front of Arden. Cash got cut loose that same week. Full board vote. Official reason, mismanagement and unauthorized vendor relationships. The unofficial reason, nobody wanted to be the one left holding the bag after the state started poking around. But Cash didn't take the fall like a man. He blew up. He threatened lawsuits. He blamed shady third-party vendors. He called the entire audit a manufactured smear job and tried to paint himself as the scapegoat. Said it was jealousy and family politics, like he was some innocent consultant who just got caught in a bad breakup. Arden didn't flinch. He pushed for restitution for employees. Not later, not in theory, but immediately. He said it flat. If they wanted to fix it, they had to pay the people who carried the business while leadership drained it. He stood up for Reese and the rest of the staff, not just because it was right, but because he knew Gordon's next move would be to sweep it all under internal correction. And that plan died fast. Once Reese and a few others realized they weren't alone, they filed formal HR complaints and gave copies to Gwen. That shifted the whole thing from family drama to public risk. It became bigger than a payout. It became exposure. Lester stepped in after that. He brought in outside counsel and insisted on mandatory reporting, not because he suddenly grew a spine, but because he wasn't going to let his name get tied to a cover-up at 58 years old. He'd watched one too many good old boys end up in cuffs because they thought legacy could outvote law. In the deposition summaries I saw later, Cash contradicted himself 3 different times about vendor history, approval chains, and bank routing. Gwen flagged his transfers. Some of them went straight into entities he claimed he had never heard of. The trail was stupidly obvious. Fake names, quick approvals, missing service reports. It was textbook. The fourth location, the one Nyla had used for her big, grand opening post, got paused, then quietly shut down. They couldn't afford it anymore. Not financially, not legally, not optically. The growth story that built this whole mess couldn't survive real daylight, and they couldn't keep borrowing against fake momentum. They thought they were building an empire. Turns out they were just digging a hole. Just under 3 months after that meeting, the deposit hit my account. No fanfare, no confetti, just a notification buzz and a number that had taken 9 years, a marriage, and a war to earn. I didn't go out and celebrate. I didn't even stand up. I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the balance like I'd been bracing for the next hit, and suddenly, there wasn't one. Mallory followed it up with another win. She negotiated a structured restitution plan for employees, real funds, tracked and enforced, tied to payroll cycles, not vague promises. She said, "What they owe you doesn't end with you," and I knew she meant every word. Cash didn't dodge it all. He ended up with charges tied to wire fraud, false records, and theft by deception. Arden forwarded me the public filing once it posted to the county docket. I didn't gloat, I just read it twice and archived it. Nyla never saw a courtroom, but she lost something bigger, her grip on the story. She was forced out of day-to-day operations, shuffled into a non-operational brand ambassador role, which was their polite way of saying, "We don't trust you with decisions anymore." That cut deeper than handcuffs ever would. Gordon's image took a hit too. People still bought muffins, but the myth of the wholesome family-run bakery empire cracked, and news travels fast in towns like ours. Reputation was his currency, and watching it lose value hit harder than any check he cut me. Arden stepped into the role I always knew he could handle, with real authority, not just a title. He overhauled the systems, fixed the payroll tracking, and put protections in place I'd begged for years ago when I was still burning weekends doing free labor. Reese got promoted, not to make headlines, but because he earned it. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't have to smile through lies just to keep his job. That mattered more than I expected. I didn't go back. I didn't consult. I didn't stick my head in the window to say "told you so." I stayed gone. I let the filings and audits speak for me. I had nothing left to prove to people who already showed me who they were. With the payout, I leased a narrow little storefront near a commuter strip. Just a grab-and-go breakfast counter. 5 stools, 1 register, honest food, honest books. No partners, no in-laws, no favors owed. Every number tracks, every check clears. Nobody pulls a shift they don't get paid for. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Sometimes when I lock up at night, I think about those 3 words, check the books, and how Nyla thought she was humiliating me when she posted that banner. She didn't know she'd just set it off. I'm not proud of how it ended. But I'm proud I stopped letting people bleed me out and call it love. Hold up before you bounce. When someone takes credit for your work and acts like you're the problem, do you fight back or swallow it? If you've got the hype button, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Then please subscribe and hit like. It's 1 click and it matters. Now drop a comment, even just good story, or tell me what you'd do.